This is a story about Kaden, his 47 chromosomes, his fighting spirit, and why the McLean family celebrates Down Syndrome Awareness Month. Hi, my name is Laura McLean, and I'm here because I have the privilege of being Kaden's mama and telling our Down syndrome story. I'm a local Yorba Linda resident and the mama of Kaden, my vivacious 4-year-old with Down syndrome. I want to say thank you to Amy for inviting me to speak tonight to share our family story and to shout the worth of individuals with Down syndrome as we celebrate Down Syndrome Awareness Month as we do every October. So, what is Down syndrome? If you're anything like I was 5 years ago, you might have heard the term but not really know what it is or how it affects someone. Down syndrome is a genetic disorder caused when abnormal cell division results in extra genetic material in your 21st chromosome. So, Down syndrome causes distinct facial appearance, intellectual disability, developmental delays, and it may be associated with many different types of health diseases, mainly heart, thyroid, and blood related. The type of Down syndrome that's the most common and the kind that Kaden has is called trisomy 21. And that means that you have a full triplicate of your 21st chromosome. It's a completely random occurrence. So nothing that the mother does in pregnancy affects the diagnosis, and it's not related to any specific cause, and it's not an inherited gene. If every fetus conceived with Down syndrome was brought to term, you and I would know a heck of a lot more individuals with Down syndrome, and it would just be a more common occurrence amongst people you knew, your pool of Instagram friends, the kids in your class. One out of every few hundred people would have Down syndrome. So why didn't I know a single person with Down syndrome until I was thrown into this world? One of the reasons is because the rate of abortion is so extremely high. The rate of abortion in some countries in Europe, such as Iceland, is 100%. So that means that when a mother receives a prenatal diagnosis, meaning she's pregnant and she's done the genetic testing, 100% of the time she is asked to terminate the pregnancy. Where in the US, the number's lower, it's 67%. It's still quite high. And a lot of moms either choose not to get prenatal genetic testing or they conduct the testing, but they get what I got, which is called a false negative. And they say, hey, your chance of having a baby with Down syndrome is almost zero. In my case, I believe it was 1 in 200,000. And there were no soft or hard markers on any of my ultrasounds that showed the possibility of Down syndrome. So he wasn't diagnosed until birth. So, our diagnosis story starts 5 years ago this month, actually. I was already months into my pregnancy. My husband, Steve, and I walked into a 4D ultrasound appointment to find our baby's gender, only to be told there's one head and there's another head. And naturally, my mind processed this as we're having a two-headed baby. And Steve was next to me, absolutely freaking out. And he was just like stammering, like, are you playing with us? Is this a joke? But she definitely was not playing around. There were two beautiful babies in there that I would carry for only 10 more weeks after that initial appointment. The chances of having fraternal twins, one with Down syndrome, is just 14 in a million. So our spontaneous twin pregnancy with Kaden and Petra, it was literally equivalent to winning the lottery, but it would take me months to realize that. I read all the baby books. I joined the baby center blogs. I never missed an OB appointment, but nothing in those books or on Facebook looked like my birth story. Nothing I could have read prepared me for the story that eventually became ours. I remember feeling so much pressure during my C section and then a sense of relief. I knew the twins were out, but I don't remember hearing any crying. I just ignorantly thought somebody would place like two big, healthy babies on my chest, and the Justin Bieber song that was playing in the background would just become a part of our, fun birth story. But nobody put any babies on my chest. I saw no babies leave the room, but I heard the wheels of the incubators race out of there, and out of my peripheral vision, I could see that about a dozen doctors and nurses had left with them both. And I remember yelling, are they okay? But at that point, I was given some Valium, and the feeling was just warm and heavy, and I passed out. Hours later, I would wake up to a nurse handing me these 4 photos in a small manila envelope. She put it on my patient tray, and I remember just ripping it open and looking at the first pictures I would ever see of my babies. They were so small, they were tiny. They were in two separate NICU rooms. They were hooked up to dozens of machines, none of which I knew anything about at that time. And to the staff, they didn't have names. They were just baby girl A and baby boy B. They were a floor below me, so I wouldn't be able to meet them until I was stronger and I was no longer a stroke risk. And Steve was with them, and I knew that they were alive. When you're a healthy 20-something-year-old pregnant woman, no one tells you that anything could go wrong. No one tells you not to write a birth plan because it'll probably go right out the window. No one tells you that you might not meet your babies until days after they're born, that one of them might have Down syndrome, that they could not be held, nursed, or kissed. No one tells you that you could be discharged 9 days later on maternity leave and be sitting in your living room with no babies and think, what just happened to me? 10 days ago, I was 33 weeks pregnant. I had two babies safe inside me. And today I'm at home and the babies are in plastic boxes 15 miles away, living in the NICU. And I have to wait for a ride to go see them to remind myself that they're real, that they used to be safe, but now that they're fighting for their lives and that they fit in the palm of my hand. No one tells you of all of those because the possibilities are truly endless. And years later, you would be holding them in your arms thinking, thank God no one told me. Kaden has changed my life infinitely for the better. There are lyrics that go, there is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And that describes our lives perfectly. Our world felt so crushed and so cracked when we received Kaden's at birth diagnosis of Down syndrome. I laid flat on my back after having the C-section in the recovery room, and Steve was sleeping in the bed next to me, and the geneticist actually walked in and starts talking to me, asking me extensive questions, which I didn't know at the time were out of the ordinary. I hadn't met the twins yet. They were in the NICU, but I thought they were routine. And then she blurts out, you do know we think your son has Down syndrome, right? And no one had told me yet. I was severely ill from the toxemia. And Steve woke up at that moment and he begged her to stop talking. I'll never forget what every cell in my body felt like at that moment. I had no idea of what was to come in the months ahead, but I remember just praying to God in the hospital that Kaden did not have Down syndrome and that this was not real. It would take 3 days for us to get our diagnosis. But in that time, I remember asking her, what is Down syndrome? And she said, you don't know anyone with Down syndrome? She was shocked. And truly, why did neither Steve or I in our 30s at this point know a single person with Down syndrome? Why weren't individuals with Down syndrome in our classrooms and growing up? Why weren't they on our soccer teams? Why weren't they at our birthday parties? Our lack of awareness and our knowledge was probably 90% of the reason that we were so scared of this diagnosis. The first 29 weeks of my pregnancy were absolutely perfect. I started to imagine this beautiful life with my boy-girl twins, and it took me a really long time after the diagnosis to feel as though I could have ever had that life I imagined. Kaden cracked that image for me. He absolutely shattered my world, but through that came so much light. Light like I had just never seen before, light in the form of an insane family bonding between our siblings and our parents who have rallied around us to help us raise the twins as our village, light in the form of awesome families and their inspiring kids who have become siblings to my kids. We are forever connected by a 21st chromosome and a fierce love for our tribe. I will never try to fix the cracks that God has given us. Instead, we've decided to let all of that light shine through Casey and into our lives. And we finally realized that we are not alone, something that we thought definitely we were alone and we were the only couple raising a child with Down syndrome in Orange County, but we were so wrong. And here's our team, 72 people strong at our first annual buddy walk at Angel Stadium. Kaden is now a thriving, happy, and able preppy kindergartner, and he is pure joy. Because he was born to us in 2016, he was given life-saving medical intervention, including glucose, oxygen, antibiotics, a CPAP, and he was fed, loved on, and cared for. And we had the absolute pleasure of taking this bundle of joy home with us to love and to hold and to grow and to educate. And this wouldn't have been the case had he been born just a few short decades ago when I was born. Up until the late 80s, many hospitals presented a really bleak picture of kids with Down syndrome. They were still called Mongols at that point, and parents were told that they would never mature or learn to bathe themselves or eat independently, and that they were better off dead. Giving a baby breast milk or formula was seen as a life-saving measure. So if the child couldn't nurse, they were just left to die. And we were asked ourselves, honestly, at the hospital, if we wanted to give Kaden up to a group home here locally in Orange, where he would be raised apart from his family, which we, of course, declined. We're so lucky that Kaden was born to us in 2016 in Orange County and in the Placentia Yorba Linda School District because of his life-saving measures, both in the NICU and all of his subsequent care at Children's Hospital Orange County, which has become our second home, and his intensive early education intervention program, which is funded by Regional Center. He got hours of physical, occupational, feeding, and speech therapy a week, starting at just 6 weeks old. Here he is working really hard at PT twice a week, OT twice a week, speech once a week. So he stays really busy. He learns a lot of everyday tasks, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and communication. He's had his fair share of hospital stays and a long list of comorbidities, many of which are due to Down syndrome, some of which are due to him being a preemie, but none of them define him. Through all of his PICU stays, continuous oxygen use, wearing his CPAP at night, nothing can stop this kid from living a fulfilled and fully included life. Here are some more snapshots of his many visits and stays at Chalk, who we are just forever indebted to. Our hope for Kaden is exactly like our hope for his typically developing twin sister, Petra, that they both grow up in an inclusive and diverse community, and they're not focused on being the smartest kids in the room, but just the kindest, where they create, learn, grow, and form lifelong friendships in the same neighborhoods where Steve and I grew up, and where they continue to teach their friends about slowing down, appreciating differences, and not being scared of one extra little chromosome. There's a saying in the Down syndrome community where we call ourselves the lucky few, and many of us have this tattooed on us. We literally wear it on our sleeves. I mean, of all the differences that can occur in your kids, how lucky are we to have been blessed with this one, to have been given Down syndrome? I mean, this life is not filled with consistent joy and rainbows, but it is absolutely overflowing with growth and love. And I wouldn't change a thing about Kaden for the world, but I sure as hell will change the world for him. So what can you do to make a difference or to raise awareness and really celebrate Down syndrome? You just celebrate difference in ability, practice person first language. Kaden is not Down syndrome. Kaden has Down syndrome. Follow inclusion and awareness accounts on social media, support local organizations, bring awareness to Down syndrome on March 21st. 3 copies of your 21st chromosome, easy to remember, by wearing different colored socks and talking about your new buddy, Kaden. And don't practice ableism. So ableism is the discrimination of people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. And so people with disabilities need to be fixed or need to catch up. And that's not what we're trying to do for Kaden or any of his buddies. We just want to celebrate them for who they are. So I so appreciate the opportunity to introduce our family and share Kaden's story to our extended community and shed some light on the beauty that is Down syndrome. If you want to follow our crazy little crew, you can find us on Instagram at us2max. And always remember that different is the new normal. Bye.